ready to rethink everything you thought you knew about life insurance. I mean, it's not just about numbers and policies, especially in Japan.
No, not at all.
We're really diving deep into how life insurance in Japan, it became so deeply woven into the fabric of Japanese society, influencing social change,
Yeah.
shaping families,
Uh-huh.
even playing a role in wartime propaganda.
It's a fascinating story, yeah.
Wild, right?
We're talking about a product that started as a really tough sell, viewed with suspicion in the late 19th century.
Wow.
And then it evolved to become almost synonymous with a secure and successful future.
Exactly. And to unpack this, we're turning to,
New Selling the Future.
yes, New Selling the Future by Ryan Moran.
By Ryan Moran, yep.
It's an incredible read, full of surprising details about how life insurance went from, like, this niche concept to a cornerstone of Japanese life.
What's remarkable is how the book reveals the strategic ways insurance companies and even the government shaped public perception.
It's true.
It's like early influencer marketing, but with a Meiji-era twist.
I love that. Okay, let's rewind to those early days. What were the biggest hurdles for those first life insurance companies in Japan?
Oh, man. Imagine trying to convince people to pay for something that only pays out when they're gone, you know?
Yeah.
Like, give us your money, we'll give it to your family after you die.
Right, exactly.
It was a
Yeah.
radical idea in the late 1800s, like, people just weren't.
Yeah, it's a tough sell.
It was a super tough sell. Companies like Meiji Life,
Yeah.
they had to get creative to build trust.
What they do, did they just try to import Western practices, like wholesale?
They did borrow, but they did it strategically.
Okay.
So Meiji Life used British actuarial tables from 1840s London.
Huh.
And they argued that Japan in the 1880s, in terms of mortality, wasn't so different from that era in London.
Interesting.
This let them kind of like demonstrate calculations based on something, even without existing Japanese data.
So, a bit audacious, but clever. It makes you wonder how closely those mortality rates actually aligned. But they needed more than just, like, borrowed math, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Moran highlights how Meiji Life tapped into elite networks, specifically alumni of Keiichijuku School.
Oh, wow.
Their very first customer was Utsunomiya Saburo.
Okay.
Now, he was a prominent scientist,
Uh-huh.
and get this, he just happened to be a friend of Fukuzawa Yukichi.
No way.
Yeah, a hugely influential thinker at the time. Talk about a power move.
It's amazing how much those early connections mattered. Right.
It's everything.
But as Japan industrialized, life insurance went through a major shift, right?
Huge shift.
It went from being about protecting family fortunes for the elite
Right,
to something more about securing a future for the growing middle class.
exactly.
And this is where things get really interesting,
Yeah,
because it starts to intertwine with the changing definition of a good life in Japan.
it really does.
So less about preserving what you had and more about building something new.
100%.
Yeah.
One product that really embodies this is endowment insurance, which became hugely popular in Japan. It combined life insurance with an investment element, promising payouts in old age.
It's like a built-in retirement plan.
Hmm.
No wonder it resonated in a rapidly modernizing Japan. People were looking for ways to, like, achieve upward mobility and secure a comfortable future.
Totally. And this is where we see life insurance going beyond just financial security. It becomes about aspiration, social status, even national identity.
Speaking of aspirations, Moran's book delves into the sales tactics used to sell this vision of a secure future.
Oh, yeah.
What were some of the key approaches they used?
Well, for one, they went beyond just dry facts and figures, you know.
Right.
They tapped into emotions and desires. One major tactic was appealing to responsibility.
Okay.
So framing life insurance as the responsible choice for a family man, especially with the rise of nuclear families, less reliant on extended kinship networks.
So this new sense of self-reliance, driven in part by social change, becomes a selling point.
100%, yeah. It wasn't just about fear, though. Insurance companies were incredibly insightful in their approach. They wouldn't just look at demographics. They'd observe customers' habits, aspirations.
It sounds almost like a precursor to modern market segmentation.
Exactly. They were tailoring pitches to individual lifestyles and goals way back then.
That's incredible. Okay, but you can't talk about sales tactics without mentioning the emotional element. How did they use that to their advantage?
Oh, they were masters at balancing hope and fear.
Really?
Ads and pitches would paint these rosy pictures of a bright future for your children, but they'd also subtly remind you of life's uncertainties,
Oh, I see.
especially potent after events like the 1923 Great Kanto earthquake.
Yeah, and it's interesting how these private companies, they weren't alone in shaping the narrative around life insurance, right?
Right.
The government stepped in with Conpo,
Yeah.
their own postal life insurance system.
Right. We touched on that earlier. It wasn't just about providing a service, was it?
There was a whole social engineering aspect to it, as Moran described.
Absolutely. Japan was experiencing rapid industrialization.
Sure.
Urbanization, poverty, labor unrest, like these were very real concerns.
Yeah.
The government saw the working class as both a potential source of instability
Right.
and a resource that needed to be managed. Right.
So Compo becomes this tool, the safety net, but also like a way to encourage certain behaviors.
Totally. Financial discipline, health, national unity, these were all tied into Compo. And it's not just the policies themselves.
Right.
It's the messaging. They emphasize this idea of like mutuality, everyone contributing to a common pool that benefits all members.
This idea of collective responsibility. But wasn't that already present in how some private companies operated?
Yes.
I'm thinking of like the
Like
difference
the-
between stock companies and mutual companies.
You're spot on. In those early days, both types emerged.
Hmm.
You had stock companies owned by shareholders, right?
Okay.
And then mutual companies owned by their policyholders.
Okay. So in a mutual company, it's like the policyholders are part owners, sharing in the profits.
Exactly.
Okay. That seems to fit right in with that Japanese emphasis on collective good.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Moran highlights how mutual companies really leaned into that,
Yeah.
positioning themselves as almost like social bodies,
Yeah. Interesting.
united by a common purpose. But even stock companies, they were using the language of like mutuality, emphasizing that collective nature of risk sharing.
So even if the corporate structure wasn't truly mutual, they still tapped into that sentiment.
Yeah.
To make life insurance more appealing, it was good marketing.
Oh, for sure. And, it's not just about the product, it's about what that product represents. And in a Japan grappling with modernization, that sense of belonging and security, that resonated deeply.
It makes you realize that life insurance wasn't just reflecting those anxieties about rapid change. It was actively shaping how people navigated them.
100%.
Yeah.
It's a two-way street. And it makes you wonder about the individuals who are actually buying these policies.
Sure.
Like, what were their hopes and fears? What drove them to see life insurance as the answer?
It's easy to get caught up in the big picture, the government, the companies, but ultimately it's about individual choices.
It is.
What does Moran say about that?
Well, he points out that their motivations varied.
Okay.
Some were driven by a very practical need to protect their families in case of their death.
Sure.
Others saw it as an investment,
Okay.
especially like with endowment insurance offering those payouts in old age.
So that desire for a good life, not just survival,
Right.
but like a secure future.
Exactly. And this ties into the changing family structure of the time.
Okay.
With the shift towards nuclear families during the Meiji period, people relied less on extended kinship networks for support. Life insurance became even more crucial.
Yeah, it's like you're more on your own.
Yeah.
So you better have a plan.
Right. And the messaging from insurance companies reflected that. They emphasized individual responsibility. This image of the good husband and father providing for his family no matter what.
They weren't just selling a product, they were selling a certain image of masculinity almost.
Totally. And let's not forget those emotional tactics, painting those idyllic pictures of a secure future.
Right.
But then, that subtle reminder of life's uncertainties. Moran points out how events like the Great Kanto earthquake, those really amplified those anxieties.
It's amazing how they use these real-world events to really drive their message home.
Totally. It was a potent mix, but it wasn't just fear. Remember those health initiatives we discussed?
Yeah.
Like the health guidance stations?
Right. It's not just about paying out when you die. It's about helping you live longer.
Exactly. These stations, they provided free medical services.
Wow.
Advice on diet, exercise, hygiene, things we might take for granted now. But back then, it was revolutionary, especially for working class families.
It seems like they were trying to instill this sense of personal responsibility for health, too.
Absolutely. They wanted people to see health as something they could control, not just something that happened to them.
Right.
And it goes back to that idea of a strong nation being made up of healthy citizens.
So individual well-being tied to national strength, were there other ways they promoted this?
Oh, yeah. Moran mentions pamphlets
Okay.
and like articles on healthy living, everything from diet and hygiene to creating a healthy home environment. It was about integrating these practices into everyday life.
So it wasn't just about physical health then. What about mental health? Was that on their radar at all?
You know, it's surprising, but they did address it, at least to some extent. They offered advice on, like, stress management.
Oh, wow.
They encouraged people to seek help if they were struggling emotionally. They recognized that a healthy individual was a well-rounded individual, both physically and mentally.
It's remarkable how forward-thinking they were in some ways.
Totally. And it shows how this whole concept of well-being, it became intertwined with life insurance. It wasn't just about financial protection. It was about promoting a certain way of life.
It's like life insurance became a vehicle for social change, going way beyond its original purpose.
Exactly. But as we'll see, this complex system, carefully constructed over decades, it faced its biggest challenge yet with the outbreak of World War II.
So we've been unpacking this idea of life insurance as like a reflection of Japanese society.
Right.
But things get really interesting as we enter the World War II era.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine a more tumultuous time.
For sure.
And I'm curious to see how it impacted this industry that had become so central to Japanese life.
Yeah, as you can imagine, the war brought about a dramatic shift.
Okay.
Life insurance, once about individual aspirations
Right.
and like a secure future, it became deeply entangled with the war effort itself.
So we're not just talking about like marketing shifts, but a fundamental change in purpose.
Exactly. The government saw life insurance as more crucial than ever. And it wasn't just about supporting soldiers and their families.
Right.
It was about funding the war effort itself.
Hmm.
Moran actually highlights a renewed push for nationalization,
Really?
with figures like Mori Shutsubu
Okay.
arguing that the industry's assets should be put towards the greater good of the nation during this critical time.
Given the government's history with Konpo
Right.
and that idea of social good, it makes sense that they'd see life insurance as a tool in this way.
Totally.
But did they actually succeed in nationalizing the industry this time?
They faced strong opposition.
Oh, really?
Yeah, life insurance companies, while wanting to be seen as patriotic, they argued that nationalization would be inefficient
Okay.
and, frankly, unjust.
Sure.
They emphasized their contributions to the war effort through investments in government bonds.
So a balancing act between demonstrating loyalty,
Yeah,
but also protecting their interests?
exactly.
How did that play out?
Well, there were concessions. Companies participated in government savings campaigns,
Okay.
and they actively promoted life insurance as a patriotic duty,
Hmm.
a way to support the nation.
Interesting.
And it was really interesting to see how they adapted their messaging.
Yeah.
They emphasized how life insurance could provide for the families of soldiers killed in action.
It's a message that takes on a whole new weight during wartime.
Oh, absolutely.
That idea of protecting loved ones,
Right.
even in the face of death, it must have been incredibly powerful.
It provided a sense of security during a time of immense uncertainty and fear.
Of course.
But the war also presented enormous logistical challenges for the industry,
Yeah, I bet.
particularly around the concept of war risk.
Okay.
Like, how do you calculate premiums and payouts when the risk of death is so much higher?
That's a question I hadn't even considered.
Yeah.
It seems like an impossible calculation to make accurately.
It was a huge point of contention.
Really?
Yeah, some companies wanted to add surcharges to policies for soldiers, while others saw that as incredibly unpatriotic.
Oh, wow. A true dilemma.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine being a company leader having to weigh financial responsibility
Right.
against like public perception during such a fraught time.
Totally.
So what'd they do?
Ultimately, most companies decided to absorb the war risk themselves,
Wow.
paying out policies to soldiers killed in action without those extra premiums.
That's a huge risk for them to take.
Huge financial risk. But it speaks to the importance of public trust
Yeah.
and their relationship to the government.
It seems like a decision driven by something larger than just profit.
Yeah.
It speaks to that sense of national unity we've been discussing.
Totally.
But I have a feeling this is where the story takes a bit of a tragic turn, as we
Yeah.
know how the war ultimately played out for Japan.
You're right.
Yeah.
The irony is that the very security life insurance promised, it was shattered by the economic realities of post-war Japan.
Oh, no.
As Moran details, rampant inflation.
Right.
It rendered many policies practically worthless.
Mm.
Families who thought they'd secured their future saw those hopes dashed.
It's heartbreaking, honestly.
It is.
Life insurance, a product designed to offer protection against uncertainty,
Right.
couldn't withstand the force of the war's aftermath.
It couldn't.
It makes you think about the limits of any system
Yeah.
any plan
For sure.
in the face of such widespread devastation.
It's a stark reminder of that, for sure.
Yeah.
But it's also a story of resilience, you know?
Okay.
Japanese people rebuilt,
Right.
and the life insurance industry, though forever changed,
Yeah.
it played a role in that post-war economic recovery.
So, we come full circle.
We do.
Life insurance, once a symbol of hope and a secure future, becomes intertwined with the tragedy and uncertainty of war,
Right.
yet ultimately endures.
It endures.
It's a powerful reflection of Japan's own journey during this tumultuous period.
Exactly. And it reminds us that the story of life insurance isn't just about numbers and policies.
It's true.
It's a human story, reflecting the dreams, anxieties, and resilience of a nation navigating extraordinary circumstances.
It's been an incredible deep dive,
It hasn't.
exploring how a seemingly mundane product became so deeply intertwined with Japanese history and identity,
For sure.
from those early days of building trust
Right.
to the wartime years
Yep.
and the challenges of rebuilding. It's a story full of surprising twists and turns.
Absolutely. And it leaves us with much to consider, right?
Yeah.
How do we balance individual aspirations with national goals?
Right.
How do we create systems of security in an uncertain world?
It's true.
These are questions that remain incredibly relevant today.
Yeah.
Not just in Japan, but globally.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most compelling stories are hidden in plain sight,
They are
just waiting to be uncovered.
waiting to be uncovered.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of life insurance in Japan.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time, keep asking questions
Keep asking.
and keep exploring the world around you.